Okay,
Hi.
so in this video, this is now our, what we're calling our phase one completion signal flow video. So basically what we're going to do now with the iPhone is we're going to walk you through, now that you've been following us over the last 6 or 7 videos, everything's working, everything's patched, everything's hooked up. At the end of the last video, you saw us testing everything. It's done. Now we're ready to get to work. But before we do that, we want to walk you through how did we do the hookup from a signal flow point of view. This will be a little bit of a longer video. What we will have coming in the near future is more of a Origin beginner's guide or Origin 101 series, where we'll have very short videos showing you all the different routing and hookup configurations. Whether we're actually using some of those configurations or not, we're going to show you what's possible in very short videos. So if you're someone who owns an Origin, thinking about buying an Origin, so on and so forth, you'll know exactly how you will hook up and route the audio for your particular use case. What we're showing you here today is the way we have it configured, which is one of many different ways that you can do this. There's some similarities, but there's also way different ways you can do this, and this is one of the powerful things about this particular console. So before we get started, let's just keep in mind that the way we have this set up is for mixing only. This is not set up in any way, shape, or form today for us to do any recording. That'll be in phase 2. Phase 1 is mixing with a generous amount of hardware, but a limited amount of hardware. Okay, this is where we're ending up. So that's what we're going to do. If you have any questions at the end of the video, leave comments below. We'll be sure to answer them as quickly as we can.
Yep.
So now we're going to jump into the iPhone and we're going to walk through the whole thing. But first, we're going to pull the console out. Are we going to pull this out again?
Yeah. Last time we're pulling this out.
Last time for phase 1,
Yep.
right? So
All right, let's do this. All right. Grab your iPhone. Let's
okay,
go to
let's.
work.
Where do we want to go? Where do we want to
I
start?
am literally going to start with the computer. So, yeah. All right. All right.
Okay, so step 1 is we're starting right at the computer.
Yeah. So everything, and the same as your studio at home with your DAW and your computer, everything starts and ends at the computer. So for us, the computer of choice was a Mac Mini M1, and it is Thunderbolt connected to the X16s. The X16s are 2 X16s, but they're Thunderbolt connected together, making one big interface.
Right.
But essentially, the connection between the computer and the interface is exactly the same as yours at home. It's straight up audio in, audio out. Okay? So the audio coming out of the computer into the interface at the X16s are split out into 4 DB25 cables, each one carrying 8 channels of signal. So that's 32 channels out. Okay.
All right, so that's on the bottom. So on the bottom we have...
Yeah, so there's these 2 are the outs, and then on the bottom one, these 2 are the outs.
Right down here.
Okay.
Yep.
Then they come over into the board.
So that's 4 D sub cables.
Yep.
Coming out.
Then the 4D sub cables come into the board in 4 what we're going to call buckets, what I think everybody calls buckets, okay? So your first connection is here. This is the channel in audio. This is the audio from the interface into channels 1 through 8. And then here it's 9 through 16. And then on the other side,
it's right here.
Is 17 through 25.
Channel in right here.
Yep, and then 26 through 28 all the way on the other end.
And then right over here.
That's the audio into the board, okay? Split into the 32 channels. Now, goes through the board, and that's where things start getting a little bit complicated.
Yep.
Is we have the board set up where we have the 8 stereo groups come out of the board, go over into the patch bay for hardware patching, comes back out of the patch bay, back into the board. Okay? So those 8 stereo auxes, that's 2 D-sub cables from here over to the patch bay, back out of the patch bay, back over here, back in, so that the audio comes in to feed through the master output, and then the master output again comes out of the board here, back over to the patch bay again, and then there's an insert point for for the hardware on the master bus, and then there's also the master send out to the X16 for the print track master output track. Okay, so that's literally 6 D sub cables run the audio for the 8 bus groups, because we've also taken the 8 bus groups out again. There's a direct out for the 8 bus groups to send 8 stereo bus stems into the interfaces. So we have the ability to record 8 stereo stems. We can record the drum stem, the bass stem, all of those individually, as well as the master track in the DAW.
Right.
So that's all coming in and out of there.
Should we show them the connections of those, some of those D subs?
Bring it on over here. Yep. All of the input and output is all in this area right here.
Right.
Okay. All the input and output for the master and the D subs is right there. So your bus outputs and your bus inputs are these 4 right here. These are your bus outputs 5 through 8, 9 through 16.
Right.
Okay, or 1 through 4, 5 through, whichever you want to count it. Okay, so these are the two bus outputs that are sending the audio to the patch bays for hardware inserts. Okay? So then those come back in here.
Underneath,
these
right?
2, okay? So then these 2 jumper cables are the returns from the patch bay with the affected audio back into the buses, sending that to the bus to the bus faders on the board.
Right.
Okay.
So the outputs are the 2 top, when they're labeled, and right underneath where it's a little bit difficult to see.
Yep.
That's where it comes back in. So basically it goes out of the output to the patch bay, input.
Yep.
Out of the patch bay, back into the board.
Yep.
And the reason why there's the patch bay is so we can insert hardware on this, which we'll talk about in a bit.
Right.
So those are the 4 cables that you need to get 16 mono or 8 stereo group tracks in and out of the SSL.
Now, we also opted to record the bus stems. So that's these 2 cables right here.
On the bottom, right?
On the bottom, okay? These 2 cables right here on the bottom, these are the 8 stereo groups for stem recording. So these go directly to the X16 inputs.
So these are those are 2 output D subs.
Yep, those go directly to the inputs. Now, the main output is right here. Okay, this is your main output, and there is also then the main input return. So your mains come out here, and your inserts are also in this D sub for the main. So this is what we have, like the fusion patched into this. This comes out, goes over to the patch bay. It splits the signal off. One goes to the fusion, and then the other one goes to the X16 directly for the stem recording for the print track. And then the audio comes back in on this one. That's your return with the fusion, and so on. So again, the main outs. There's a send and return, and then another send.
Right.
In this one. So sends, returns, another send.
Right.
In the same cable. Okay? That's where it got a little confusing for me at the first to figure out how we were going to set that up. Okay? Also over here.
So let's just step back. So the group channels, once they're processed, they come back out. We talked about those 2.
Yep, come back into here.
And those go into the X16, which is right here. These are outputs. They're on the bottom. You can't see them. These are the outs on top. They're underneath.
Yeah.
Those are the inputs. So this goes out to the SSL. This underneath, the connector underneath, this cable underneath, that comes back in. So after it comes out of the bus channels, gets processed with the hardware, we come back into the X16 and we print that into the DAW.
Yep.
If we want to print the stem. So we can print drum stem, bass stem, percussion stem, keyboards, lead vocals, background vocals, guitars, all
those
of that.
are actually the 8 stereo group stems are these 2 down here.
Right here. Right.
Yeah, are these 2 here, and then this is the master in.
Got it.
That's the master in from the patch bay. Okay. So these 2 here are the stem the stem recording.
Yep.
This is the print track recording.
Yep.
Okay. Now also, we also have the monitor output. The output for the monitors, which is the master output, it's the master audio, comes out this one, and it gives you the option to hook up 4 sets of monitors.
Right, which
Okay.
we're only using
We're using 2. We have it set
so
up.
this comes out, and it's just a big XLR snake. It goes to our subwoofer, which is right down here, and then out to our focals, and then another set goes to our Avitone speakers.
Yep. Okay, so that's the main audio routing.
That's all the audio.
We also have channel inserts for effects on the first bucket here. Okay, and as you can see, it's long fader inserts, because there's also short fader inserts, but we're using the long fader.
We're not using any short faders.
We're not using any short fader. So this is the channel inserts for channel 1 through 8. So we have the kick and snare routed out of this to the Aphex 204 for processing.
Yep.
Okay, but this is the send and return for that. So this goes from here over to the patch bay and back.
Yep.
Okay, and then this set here is for channels 9 through 16. And these are going to the ART patch bay for hardware demonstrations and whatever else we can think of to do with that.
Yep.
So these 2 particular D subs are ending in TRS connectors instead of another D sub.
Right, and those are the only 2 insert buckets we're using. We're not using the channel insert buckets on the last
No,
down
actually
here.
we are.
Are we?
Yeah, because we got the vocal insert now.
Oh, right. We could talk about the. Yep. You're right.
So-
Forgot about that.
Yep, so on channels 17 through 25, the hardware insert is here. And again, this is another D sub to D sub pair of cables. This goes to the patch bay. And this is for, right now, is for the vocal processing with the Bluey compressor.
Right.
The only one we're not using is the ones for
The last bucket.
25 to 32. We're not doing anything with that at this point.
Right.
So those are left empty. Now, at this point, from my count, I think we have 22 D-sub cables plugged into the board.
And you can see there's a lot of D-sub connections that we're not using, which we're going to talk about in later videos.
Yep.
Okay.
This is, like I said, this is our particular use case on how to do this.
Now, before we get to the next step, let me just, so what that means is, what he just talked about, the inserts, we're only using 3 channels where we're inserting something on the channel. The kick, the snare, the Aphex 204, which we'll talk about when we get to the rack. That's the first bucket, the first insert cable. And then we're using channel 15 and 16. That's going to be for the hardware demos. Where we can insert, we could do different pieces of gear, set up our own special template, and we can insert those units on channels 15 and 16 so we could do demos.
Right. And then over here on channel 20.
On channel 20 for the lead vocals, that's for the Bluey, Blackline Audio Bluey FET compressor. So those are the only channel inserts that we're using. For mixing most sessions, it's just going to be vocals, kick and snare. 15 and 16 are reserved for the demos.
Yep.
For now. Okay.
Now, on the rack itself, then,
Are we done behind the board?
we're pretty much done behind the board.
Okay. Let me know.
So on the front of the rack,
Okay, front of the rack.
we have 3 Furman power conditioners
Yep.
to handle that, and these are step power conditioners, so
Yep.
things start up in specific order. Those are really nice. This is the Aphex 204 that is patched into the kick and snare on channel 1 on the first channel insert bucket. This is the distressor. This is patched into the lead Vox group.
Yep.
The fusion is hooked into the master insert, so that's on the master bus only.
Yep.
Those are your 2 Apollos. Apollo 1 handles the output for channels 1 through 16 and takes the input from the master on 3 and 4. The second Apollo handles the audio outputs to channels 17 through 32 and takes the 8 stereo stem outputs. So that's all 16 inputs are used on this one.
Okay.
Okay.
Before we get to the patch base, let's go over this rack.
So you got the empty space where the dead lexicon lived.
That's we're going to replace that. Yep.
The ART Trans Y, this is actually mine. This is on loan until we, decide what else we want to do. But this is at the present moment being used on the guitar buses. We can use it on either one.
Yep.
It's a stereo unit. The Bluey is patched into the vocal track inserts on channel 20.
Channel 20.
The NG bus is on the drum bus. The dione at the present moment is being used for keyboards, but we have the option of patching that into something else if we want to. We can actually patch anything in anywhere we want, but we're basically, this is how we have it set up right now. So the dione is on keyboards. The X to C, we've tested and does work. You can use guitar effects as a channel insert on any of the channels that we have set up through the aux sends or through the aux sends. So that's a pretty cool thing to have. We've got plenty of room in the 500 rack for stuff down the road.
Yep.
And the Audioscape LA2A is on the bass bus.
Bass bus.
So that's everything that's in there. Now the patch bays are set up. The top patch bay is taking the master, this group here, this part of it here is the master inserts and the master send. This pair of wires is the most important one. This is the final master output into the X16 for the final print track. This is the big one. These two here, this is the effects insert for the Fusion. Okay? This one right now is empty. We've got some room to expand. Then these are the two, these are the 4 D subs for the bus sends and returns. Okay, so these are the bus effects. So all of these are coming down to the bottom patch bay is where all the hardware is. This patch bay here, this is channel inserts 1 through 8. This is channel inserts 17 through 24. And then these are the aux sends and returns here, which we're not using right now, but they are hooked up. And then the bottom patch bay is all the hardware. Okay? So like I say, at this present moment, this pair here is the master send to the Fusion. These are all the bus compressors to all the different bus compressors. Okay, and then your channel inserts here. These are the kick and the snare to the Aphex, and this one is the vocal track to the Bluey. So that's the whole thing. That's the whole thing beginning to end.
Okay, that's great. So that's everything. So the only thing left to do is we'll get another reverb unit, and we already got the patch bay set up. We just have to replace the actual unit at one point. Mm-hmm. Hey guys, I just wanted to shoot this little outro here for the Signal Flow video. So I realized after doing some of this editing to this video that it could be a little bit confusing. There is a lot of cables, obviously, as you saw. Some of what we did there might be a little confusing to some of you that are not used to so many cables and such a complex audio signal flow. So I just want to let you know that if you have any questions below, leave them in the comments. I'd be glad to try to help. And also, I'm going to be creating kind of an Origin 101 beginner's guide coming up soon, where we're going to take you step by step for each different use case, meaning different scenarios on how you might use the console for both mixing and recording, and step by step what that signal flow would look like, exactly which connectors you use on the Origin and your interface for that specific use case. So that might make it a little bit more clear for you. So I do apologize if this video seemed a little bit disjointed and a little difficult to follow. It is difficult when you have so many wires, especially behind the racks. The other thing I'm going to be doing over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to start to clean up some of the wire management in the back of the racks, maybe route cables in a little bit of a different way to make things easier to see behind the rack in the gear, connected to the gear. And then I might be able to also improve on this video a little bit so you could see things a little bit more clearly. So those videos are going to come. Thank you so much for your patience. Hopefully this video at least helped you a little bit to know, kind of start to wrap your head around what the not only the signal flow, but really what's involved as far as how many cables you need and all the wiring that's involved. Because I'll tell you, the one thing that we really underestimated, at least I did, was the amount of D-sub cables that we were going to need for this project. I think we have 22 or 23 D-sub cables, D-sub to D-sub cables in this. And that doesn't include anything that's going from the patch base to the actual hardware, which is a lot of D-sub to TRS, D-sub
to XLR. So there is a ton of cabling in this, but it all does work. It's all done. Signal is routed that the way we want to route it, and everything seems to be working. The only problem that we had along the way, you might have heard in this video towards the end, this episode, or in last week's episode, where we had one defective unit. I bought one unit out of all the hardware that I own. I bought one unit used, and that was the Lexicon Reverb that we were testing out on the auxes, and I bought it off of eBay. I only tested it knowing that it would light up, but after doing some troubleshooting, we realized that audio doesn't pass through it. We have a defective unit, and that's pretty unfortunate for me. Thankfully, it was only a couple of $100, and I'm going to replace it with something else, something better soon, but that was the only real big sticking point that we have. Everything else is working. So again, thank you for your patience. Thank you for watching. I hope this was helpful. Stay tuned in the upcoming weeks for a little bit more detailed signal flow, maybe with some diagrams on the screen and showing you all that stuff to try to make the map of how you do this a little bit more clear. So until the next episode, like, share, subscribe. Thank you so much for supporting us at Mixing Music Analog. I really do appreciate it, and I'll see you guys soon.